Hello, I'm James Milan with Arlington Public News. I'm here today for a conversation about the master plan that is in the process of being developed for Arlington. And joining me to talk about this important undertaking is Carol Kowalski, our town planner, and Monica Tibbetts-Nutt and Charles Kalauskas, who are co-chairs of the Master Plan Advisory Committee. Thank you all for being here. Carol, I'd like to start with you just to get a basic grounding in the issue by answering a couple of basic questions. What is a master plan? Where does the impetus to produce one come from? And what purpose or purposes is it expected to serve?
Sure. Master plan is the town's policy statement on land use and physical development for the town. So it guides investment, both public and private. The power to undertake a master plan comes from Mass General Law. In Massachusetts, though, we are not compelled to do a master plan the way most of the states are compelled to do a master plan. Even a lot of other New England states have to have master plans. In Massachusetts, it's advisory, but your plan should precede your regulations, such as zoning. But in Massachusetts, that doesn't always happen. Current state law was developed in around 1994, and Arlington has never had a master plan as considered under Mass General Law. So a lot of what we see happening in Arlington in terms of development and investment from the private sector is ad hoc. Most businesses, when they're considering locating in a community, will think favorably on a community that has a master plan over one that doesn't. Not having a master plan can also lead to a lot of anxiety and stress, I think, for a community if we don't know where we're going.
Right, so there's a lack of predictability without one, and you're providing a structure going forward for coherence in between buildings and other purposes, et cetera.
That's right, a vision and then the actions that we expect to carry out to achieve that vision.
Monica, if I can ask you, what brought you into this project and what are the particular interests or skills that you bring to this work?
Been a transportation planner for 8 years. I work in the Route 128 corridor. I do commuter transportation. So my main focus is obviously transportation and public transit. And so that's kind of the expertise I bring to the master plan, in addition to, other planning activities, housing, land use, and things like that. So that's kind of how I got involved. And I think living in the community makes it very important for me to kind of see the plan through and make sure that the decisions, at least in my area of expertise, are kind of the best that we can make at that time.
Charlie, how about you?
I've been living in Arlington for 37 years and seen tremendous changes from an automobile-centered Massachusetts Avenue to today with bike trails. And I felt it was time to give back to the community. I'm a planner and civil engineer by training. I've consulted to over 100 communities in New England. So I thought it was time to take that expertise and give back to the community.
A master plan is obviously a multi-step process that takes place over quite a period of time. Where are we right now in this process?
I feel like we're about a third of the way into the process. We are working with a consultant who has worked with us, and we've had a lot of public input, and they've developed baseline reports, existing conditions reports on all of the elements, land use, transportation, economic development, housing. And the next step is they'll prepare working papers. We've also prepared some draft goals, and I think an important next step is for us to try to do as much surveying of the community as possible to determine whether these goals are mutually shared and the degree to which they are mutually shared, so that we have faith that these are the goals that the plan should be trying to realize.
Yeah, you mentioned surveying the community, and that reminds me that obviously public input and participation are key to the whole process. So how are you receiving that feedback, and what are you hearing from residents so far?
Starting October of last year, we had a kickoff event with a big event at the Town Hall Auditorium, and that was facilitated with a World Cafe process. It's World Cafe is used in business conferences and other ways to generate consensus on ideas through a series of rotating roundtable discussions, and that was very well received. We then had 3 workshops this summer in June. The first one was a freak Saturday heat wave, and nonetheless we were quite pleased that we had like 85 people come to the Arlington High School cafeteria. And we had one at the Hardy School and one during the day at Cambridge Savings Bank, so the business community could participate. We also had an event November 7th to try to get some feedback on the goals, to begin to get feedback on the goals, but also to get some feedback on the baseline reports. The consultant did a presentation, and we had some roundtable discussions on what the public thinks it would take to get to where we want to be.
What does the public think about these things?
I mean, I think the biggest concerns from those kind of standpoint is parking, trying to ease the congestion through Mass Ave, trying to make better transit connections utilizing the existing MBTA service with our bus service, and also the proximity to Alewife Station. And just basically trying to use the resources we have and try and maximize the efficiency of that. That seems to be overall, I mean, kind of blanket generally what we're looking at from a transportation standpoint.
Are there observations in other areas, things that you've picked up from the public, Charlie?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Preservation of open space is very important to the residents. The proximity of open space, the fact that we have neighborhood parks, play lots, I think that's very important to people. And the Minuteman Bikeway connects a lot of those open spaces as well. I think we also heard that citizens want to preserve neighborhood schools, preserve the historic buildings that we have in town, the library, the town hall, very important icons in town. And whatever we do in the future to make sure that we preserve, enhance, and build around those facilities.
Another thing we're hearing too is people really like Arlington and are getting concerned that it might be getting too expensive to maintain the mix that is unique, it has been unique about Arlington. And what do you do to maintain that mix when you've got outside forces like the real estate market? We've got this incredible real estate market, residential real estate market in Arlington. So the trend is up. So how do you preserve a range of choices for residential building and home style? That's one of the things that has come out of the workshops too.
Yeah, it seems like that has to really be a choice. You can't just let market forces or other kinds of things dictate that kind of development, because otherwise you'll find yourselves in a place that you were never anticipating, perhaps. Especially, as you say, Arlington does seem to be a hot community in terms of real estate over these
Yeah, it puts
last 20
pressure
years.
on other types of land uses. Like if we have in our regulations, for better or worse, the ability to change a business property to residential use. And that's happened in a few key parcels, and that's a decision that you then live with for 50 years or more. So that's something I think the community needs to consider is do we allow that to continue? And if not, what are the choices on what we can do about that? And what are the consequences?
And as you had mentioned earlier, there are multiple issues and components to the master plan that are being considered. I'm just going to list the major ones. That's land use, transportation, housing, economic development, open space, as you mentioned earlier, natural resources, and then historic and cultural resources. That's a lot of things to be balancing. How can you give us a couple of concrete examples of how you are balancing or prioritizing these various concerns as you move forward with the plan?
Right now we're in an information gathering phase, the baseline reports, so we really haven't put any concepts out on the table in terms of what might change. So we're about a third the way through the process, and I think it's going to take some time before we actually come up with some ideas in terms of what we might come up with for a plan to move forward and make some changes. That's yet to come.
Right, so you're not yet at that particular, crossing that particular Rubicon, which I don't envy you. I'm sure that will be one of the tougher challenges to facing you. How about maybe, if you can imagine, though, a couple of examples of the kind of development that you can imagine the master plan would seek to either promote or avoid, given what you've heard in terms of the public and what you understand to be the competing priorities?
I think one no-brainer, if I can just jump right in, is most people have said that they don't. I did hear one outlier say they'd like a big box chain store, but for the most part, we're hearing that people value the small retailers. So I would expect that if we continue to hear that, I would expect that one of the things that the plan does is to propose ways of trying to keep small businesses on Mass Ave and help them to thrive, help to promote and market the commercial districts and make them attractive and for businesses to locate there and to help them stay there and to bring people into those spaces and make them useful.
And those small businesses you're talking about, are you talking about independent businesses or possibly chains, small, not big box stores, et cetera, but nonetheless in more Subways, more Quiznos, or more kind of artisan, particular artisan shops, or do you have any idea of what kind of small business we'd be wanting to promote?
I don't think they've gotten to that fine grain of detail, but the impression I have from the feedback we've received to date is that people like the independent retailers. We also have been picking up that there are a lot of people in Arlington who work at home. And for that reason, I'm expecting that we're going to try to explore more opportunities for using space in Arlington for shared workspaces. There is a possibility that we have some property, not a lot, but some property in Arlington that could be well used for business incubators as well. So I would think that might come out of the master plan. But here again, I think it's really important that we continue to try to survey the public in a more broad and complete way. A little editorial comment, I think having to ask people to come out to a workshop shouldn't be the only way we get feedback on the goals or the vision of the master plan recommendations.
So are you imagining surveys sent out to households or other ways in which you can get a broader, perhaps?
As resources allow, I really hope we can use technology more.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And finally, I know that you guys have made clear that you're still early, relatively early in the process. What are the next steps that we can anticipate? And let's imagine the next update that we get from you guys. What are the next steps that you are anticipating?
Well, we're going to be doing a series of working papers with the consultant to come up with some ideas, brainstorming for these different elements that you mentioned earlier in the program. So, for example, we may look at housing and what are the options for housing. As Carol mentioned before, Arlington is a very desirable community to live in for young professionals in particular because we're proximate to jobs in Boston and Cambridge, but also in Burlington and Waltham out on 128. So we're looking at all kinds of housing issues, from aging baby boomers, the elderly, all the way down to young families moving to Arlington. And what are the implications for that? What kind of housing is in demand right now? And how do we accommodate everyone?
Well, it sounds, I have to say, it sounds like a lot of work has already been done and there is much still left to do. And I wanted, on the behalf of the community, to commend the three of you for your efforts along with the rest of the community. Thank you for joining us this morning as well, Charlie, Monica, and Carol. This has been a very useful and constructive conversation. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
This is James Milan with Arlington Public News. Thanks for joining us.